It's a sad day today. As of this recording, yesterday, a legend in the comic book world passed away. A legend that even if you didn't read any of his material, you clearly have had a brush with one of his creations at some point in your life, regardless of what era you were born in.
Mm-hmm.
Stanley Martin Leiber, also known as Stanley, passed away November 12th, 2018. He was battling pneumonia for the past couple of weeks, and it finally got to him.
Yeah.
Now, granted, Stan was already a very old man.
95.
Which is nothing to shake a stick at. When we talked about the passing of Dick Gautier, it's kind of the same thing, where it's like you could say what he passed away from, but at the same time, old guy, old.
And it's not like he didn't have a good run. Like, I mean...
Oh, yeah, same thing.
I think only most of us could wish we could have a run like that and be remembered and have people come and see us and say, oh my God, you inspired me to do this and do that. Just really putting that wonder out there,
For people who don't know, Stan's biggest claim to fame was co-creation with Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko for the plethora of Marvel superheroes that we know throughout the years. Again, his work with Jack Kirby creating the cosmic universe, or alternatively the likes of Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Fantastic Four, Daredevil, Black Panther, the list goes on, and working with Steve Ditko, again, Spider-Man, and a few others. I believe he had something to do with Thor with Steve Ditko. But the point is that Stan was an idea man and worked closely with two extremely talented artists and created what pretty much made the Marvel Universe what it is today. Marvel was a company known as Timely Comics prior to that, way back in the early 20s. And Stan was just this young punk that wanted to be a lawyer, if anything. That's what he actually wanted to be. In many interviews, he's mentioned how that was kind of his dream job. And he was kind of just working at Timely, hoping to one day either write the great American novel or become a lawyer one day. And then at the age of 19, he got an opportunity to write a text-only filler story in Captain America issue number 3 back in 1941. And from that little back of the book text insert filler story, which was called Captain America Foils the Traitor's Revenge, everything ballooned from there. And then later that year, he got to actually write some actual comic book stuff. And then his first creation, The Destroyer, which again was done with Jack Kirby, that was the first character he ever created, which was a villain, again, in the Captain America comic books. And, a superhero in the Captain America comic books. And in Mystic Comics also, I believe. I forget what issue.
It's not the Destroyer armor from Thor? That's the vibe I'm getting, but I guess that's not it.
No. Completely different Destroyer.
Okay.
No. This is the 40s, where Journey into Mystery would not happen for another...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and for not quite a while. This is when Stan was 19. At a young age, he got those opportunities and flexed his muscle. And the story that he gives of why he went from Stanley Martin Leiber to Stan Lee was when he first got the opportunity to write stuff, he didn't really see it so much as a blessing as a paycheck, and he felt kind of embarrassed about being a comic book writer or writing stuff in comic books because it was the underclass, childish kind of thing. So he went with the pen name because he felt that one day, again, he's either going to be a famous lawyer or write that great American novel, and that'll be under Stanley Martin Leiber, So he went with Stan Lee. But of course, as time progressed and he became famous, that became his legal adopted name afterwards. And the rest was history there. Stan would go on to, obviously into the 60s was the humongous comic book boom for Marvel. And then all the things I just mentioned before, from Spider-Man, X-Men, from 1961 with Fantastic Four up until 1965 with the likes of Thor and the Avengers and Hulk, and of course in between there X-Men, Daredevil, and all the others, would be all the big creations that he would add to the Marvel universe that we'd still be talking about today. How does this affect Transformers? Well, around the time of the 80s, Stan stopped. Like, the thing with Stan Lee, and it was something that actually dawned on me, was the reality is when I was going to meet Stan Lee at Montreal Comic-Con, it dawned on me that I never really read much that he wrote outside of Silver Surfer or Silver Surfer related stuff through Fantastic Four. Everything that I've ever known of Stan Lee was usually something else. It wasn't comic book related. So I actually went out before pretty much meeting him, and I got this great omnibus, which was like all of Stan Lee's like greatest creations in one.
Mm-hmm.
And it dawned on me that when I looked at his, I guess we could call it his bibliography, he didn't write an incredible amount of comics. He wrote a good amount in the 60s and the 70s, but then it all kind of dropped off, and then he became more of a figurehead for the company. He was a creator and really a writer kind of second. And what happened was afterwards is in the 80s, he put a bigger focus into Marvel as a media production company with all of these great characters that they have. So leaving New York, which is where Marvel Comics was located, he went west to specifically California and the headquarters of Los Angeles, California, where they started Marvel Productions. And Marvel Productions was the co-company that worked with Sunbow Entertainment, and we kind of know where we're going with this, which would then lead to all the cartoon creations started with G.I. Joe, Gem, Transformers, My Little Pony. So he wasn't directly behind the creation of Transformers, but the domino effect of Marvel Productions coming into creation in 1981 and Sunbow, which is Griffin Bacall and their contribution, those two together would go on to then create this big company, which would then lead to the creation of Transformers and that of the comic book, the 84 cartoon, and of course the 86 movie. Now, what does that have to do with Stan Lee in the longer run when it comes to Transformers? Well, according to an interview, and I had to actually dig up this interview because I remember hearing about it years ago, and I couldn't find it when I went looking for it, but then when I used Internet Archive, I was able to find it. There was an interview with Bob Bugansky, one of the co-creators of Transformers and the godfather of the original G1 family, if you will. And he said that Stan Lee, while he was in the West Coast working with Marvel Productions, he was still reading some of the Marvel books that were coming out, and he still was responsible for the Stan Soapbox, which was an insert in almost every Marvel issue. And he actually wrote a glowing fan letter to Bob Bugansky about issue number 23 of the Marvel run of the G1 books.
What was issue 23 about? Do you remember?
Issue 23 was the Decepticon graffiti. That it's a play on American graffiti.
Okay.
It's the one that, for people who don't remember, it's the issue that has the Statue of Liberty on it, and you have the runabout and run amok, obviously having graffiti all over it. And he really liked that issue and the social commentary in it, because usually a lot of the to sell toys books that existed with Marvel usually didn't have very deep stories. They were more about, we got to introduce these toys and then
these characters and stuff,
and just let them go through their motions, and that's it. But by issue 23, and this is Transformers is now 2 years into its book, Bob was really going through the motions of really telling good stories and stuff like that, and it ties into like almost our last segment where we were talking about some really good stuff to read when it comes to Transformer comics, and that Marvel run, a lot of really good stuff in there, especially when it comes to non-show characters. And Decepticon Graffiti features 2 characters in it that were non-show characters for Generation 1, but were Generation 1 characters in Runabout and Runamuck. So definitely like, pick that up if you can and give it a read. But so that even Stan was a big fan of that. And for him to write in and say that he loved it, to Bob, that was a big deal, because by the time Bob was working in Marvel, Stan was already not there anymore. He was on the other side of the country. So Stan was a big influence to a lot of individuals, even in the Transformer world. I know that when I bought some animation cells of the 86 movie from Ron Freeman, he sent me a photograph of him with Stan Lee when they were working on the Iron Man cartoon for the Marvel Action Hour. And that was one of his like greatest moments and stuff too. And I still talk with Ron Freeman back and forth once in a while, mostly to try to get more animation cells. But sorry, Ron, but his garage is a treasure trove, to say the least.
Treasure trove.
Treasure trove. Sorry, it's a tongue twister, that one. But yeah, so Stan was a big freaking deal, and especially working with comic book guys, I can't stress enough how every single individual was affected by his passing yesterday. And I mean, I won't even bother to name names because there's just too many. But every single individual, every single artist that I know is affected by this. And the crazy thing is that, he really stopped writing comic books before most of us were even born, of us 80s or 90s kids. But his legacy always, echoed in anything that we watched. I know that you mentioned how the first time you heard his voice was Pride of the X-Men.
Yeah. When I was, oh my God, maybe 4, I want to say. Could have been. No, I don't think it was 3. I think it was probably 4 or 5. The Power Block actually played Pride of the X-Men. I remember seeing this as a kid on TV and then just nothing happening with it. But I know the intro is him talking about the X-Men and, they have crazy powers and this and that, yada, yada, yada.
This is Stan Lee.
Yeah, just him really pitching the show, even though the show is going on, And, like, you don't see him during that segment because it's setting up this mood, this caravan's going through, this convoy's going through, and then Magneto comes and steals something from it.
No, he was actually, Magneto was captured in that caravan.
Oh, my bad.
And he was freed from it by White Queen.
My bad.
It's okay. I watched that tape a billion times.
Well, I remember it was only later. Like, I thought it was a fever dream I had, and then everyone was able to get that pilot through Scholastic. And then, like, oh my goodness, this is the thing I actually watch. I can't believe it's real. Yeah. And then I remember watching the Fantastic Four on CBS Saturday mornings, and he did some of the intros for it as well. And you actually got to see his face and see him talking to you, and just really kind of, again, he's the pitch man. He's there telling you about, some people think they know everything about the Fantastic Four. Well, I mean, the cartoon kind of gave you a good, like, you don't have to like go and find and hunt that really expensive issue of the Fantastic Four #1. At least the cartoon show gave you that like really nice, here's what it is, this is what's going on. But I thought it was really cool, like just having him, like even before we got the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and even before he made that nice cameo in Spider-Man, where like Spider-Man goes to the alternate dimension where like I think his version of Peter Parker is playing Spider-Man in a TV show, so he has no powers whatsoever.
Yeah.
And he ends up meeting up with Stan Lee, and he's web swings with him around and everything. I also posted up another video on Facebook where it's just every single Stan Lee cameo, regardless of MCU, regardless of all that. And so I think one of the bigger ones was when Kevin Smith had him in Mallrats.
Yes.
Yeah, and Brody constantly asks him about Mr. Fantastic and if Mr. Fantastic's member stretches as well. And he's like, if you weren't thinking about that, I think you would probably have a girlfriend or something like that.
And the funny
he kind
thing
of digs into him a little bit.
To mention that Mallrats thing, outside of the Lou Ferrigno series, which was technically his first cameo ever.
Yeah, it definitely shows that first.
But outside of that, the Mallrats appearance, which if I want to pinpoint, it was super early. I want to say 93 was Mallrats. I know it was super early.
We're gonna go into the internet here, but it's. I want to say 95. Let's find out.
Yeah,
Mall. Because I know Clerks was earlier than that.
Yes, Clerks was earlier. That was one of Kevin Smith's first movies. Mallrats was his first ever Hollywood outing, so to speak. Clerks was more of an indie movie. But I want to say that Mallrats...
95, I was right.
Mallrats was actually kind of one of his first ever, like, mainstream cameos. You know, like if you want to say, what was Stanley's first, cameo in a Hollywood movie, it was actually technically Clerks. Not Clerks, Mallrats. It was actually technically. And... but you were mentioning before, like Spider-Man and Fantastic Four, like if there was,
and I want to also throw out another one which was really cool, which was what was it? It was the Black Panther animated series that came out a few years ago, and he plays one. He actually plays one of the quote unquote racist generals in the war room for the States. And like he does a really good job, and he ends up getting like kicked out of the war room because he's like, Wakanda, they're nothing. They just have this, that, and the other. Like what kind of black country? Blah blah blah. And then like he realizes the person heading the war room is like Condoleezza Rice kind of character. She's a black woman. Like, no, they're actually X, Y, and Z. They got all this stuff that we're not really privy to. Blah 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 blah. So I thought he did a really, really good job as that. I laughed really hard. And I was like, oh man, this poor character's getting kicked out. Like this poor general's getting kicked out. He's like, no, I didn't mean it.
I find that if you had to pinpoint like which characters truly or which books truly sum up what would be Stanley, because he gets a lot of credit for a lot of different creations. I found that his babies more than anything were the Fantastic Four. And in relation to that, the Silver Surfer stuff as a result in Galactus, and Spider-Man. The most stuff that he's ever written was Fantastic Four stuff and Spider-Man stuff. He wrote the first 100 issues of Spider-Man nonstop. Issue 1 of Amazing Spider-Man up to 100. And then he took some breaks, and then he came back and forth. And it's the same thing with Fantastic Four. Issue number 1 of Fantastic Four all the way up to number 114, then took some breaks, then would peek in here and there. And same thing, everything with later on with Jim Starlin and everything, and Jack Kirby with some Silver Surfer, just all over the place. So, but those, like, specifically Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, those are his babies more than anything, even though he is credited with, Daredevil and Hulk and Thor, and it goes on, Black Panther. But it's those were the ones, those two specifically.
I'm just looking at his IMDb page and just looking at him as an actor. It says right here that for the Incredible Hulk TV show, he was the narrator, apparently, for all 13 episodes.
Oh, very possible, yeah.
So, like, anytime you hear someone talking, that's most likely him.
Well,
same for Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. He was the narrator.
And that was his thing, is that when he went west,
he was in Muppet Babies. He played Stanley.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, yeah, Muppet Babies was Marvel Productions. Like at the end of every Muppet Babies episode, you see the Marvel Productions Spider-Man logo. At that point, that was Margaret Loesch, which people associate today with, let's say, the X-Men cartoon and Spider-Man from Fox Kids. She was a big part of bringing all of that to life, but she was the one who pretty much brought Stan Lee into that whole creative process too. When it came to the bigger animation stuff of the 90s, when it came to Marvel, she brought a lot of that into there, and she, but we're enough about her. Like,
sorry,
pretty much with like the thing that I find amazing with Stan was just how he managed to still always be in the public eye. Like a lot of people are like, some people are saying like, oh, I hope he'll be remembered, and I go, you know what? If you're someone if you're worth your weight in comic book knowledge, we still worship and talk about Jack Kirby to this day. Yeah. And Jack was...
I mean, hell, they even make him God in the Marvel Universe.
Oh,
in
of
the
course.
Comic books.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm going to go... Like, they end up seeing God, and it's Jack Kirby.
Jack Kirby, exactly. And it's so, if anything, if anything, there's no way that Stan will ever be forgotten. The man again was the driving force behind a lot of important properties that we're still seeing in theaters today and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure there's going to be a million awards and memorials named after him in the wake of all of this. The one thing that I found fascinating was because not too long ago, last year, around this time, his wife passed away, Joan, which he was married to for, oh my God, since the 40s. They were always married together. And so she passed away. And then a year later, now he passes away. So sometimes I always say, oh, maybe it was just loneliness. That's why he passed away.
Yeah.
And she was a year younger than him. And so they both, lived a long, amazing life. Like I always say, it's very hard to feel sad when someone passes away, but they not only did they pass away like as old as we should only pray to be that old. Like we should only be lucky to make it to 95. But we should only be just as lucky to make it to 95 and be as that accomplished as Stan was. And Stan was, again, an idea man, the dream that most of us, creative people could only hope to have those opportunities for his ideas to come to a reality and affect that many people. Like I said, me and you, we might not have read a majority of his comics due to the fact that we were 80s and 90s kids. So a lot of the books that we read that were brand new were more of the Jim Lees, the Todd McFarlanes, the Jim Starlins and stuff with Infinity Gauntlet. But we still were reading characters that were created by him, and
the fact that he also was, how do I put it? Like, I mean, I feel like it wasn't just comic books. It wasn't just TV shows as well. Like it was also video games too. There was also a time where he presented Hideo Kojima with an award, and he dressed up as old Revolver Ocelot. And everyone was like, "Oh!" Everyone freaked out because he looked spot on. It wasn't a half-assed costume that he came out in.
I really want to be in Kojima's head when that happened. When one of your creations is being cosplayed by Stan Lee.
Yeah, exactly. and I'm sure, like, and Kojima is known to be a guy that really loves, American Western stuff. So like he probably just like, he was just like, oh my God.
You see a lot of it in Metal Gear, so it's clear that he really enjoys that kind of stuff. But either way, Stan, we're gonna miss you.
Miss you a lot, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
like I was funny. I was standing in my kitchen, and I was just saying to myself, I'm like, it's kind of like that before Christ, after Christ thing. It's like I feel like now it's a new era. Like now that he's gone, it's going to be a different era for comic books. It's like, this is the day that Stan Lee passed away, and comic books are going to be different now. Even though he hasn't been writing comics for a very long time, it's going to be a different era now. It's going to be a different feeling, and it's just not going to be the same. And I know people were wondering, is he still going to appear in cameos? Apparently, Marvel planned in advance, and they knew that this day could come in. So they actually pre-recorded a whole bunch of cameo stuff to be used in future movies. So,
because I know with Deadpool 2, like he wasn't physically there in a cameo, but like there's a scene where they're parachuting in, and you see like a big mural of him, basically.
Well, see, that's just it. So
I don't know. I don't know, like if these tributes are him actually doing things. Like, I know in the few of the Spider-Man ones, it's him saving people. Like one thing I liked about the Spider-Man 1 and 2 with Tobey Maguire is that there'll be like rubble falling, and he'll pull somebody out of the way of the falling rubble. Like that was like make him look like a little bit of a hero. He's doing his part too.
Well, even as much as people don't enjoy Spider-Man 3, that was one of the few moments where he had a scene where he's talking with Tobey Maguire's character and giving him a little bit of advice, so I think it was like how one person could make such a difference and stuff like that. And then he says "Nuff said" at the end. And it's just, he's to a whole generation of people, he was the cameo guy from Marvel. Yeah. But he was so much more, and I feel that we have not seen the last of Stan. I get a feeling we're going to see him a lot more in future comic book movies.
What's going to be a little bit scary is the way Marvel movies are right now, and well, I should just say Disney in general. So it kind of started with I want to say Tron Legacy, where it's like, oh, we're gonna take this actor and make them look younger. And
yes, I know where you're getting at.
And then with the what do you call them again? The Marvel Cinematic Universes, where they're taking older actors and making them look young again, and they're getting better at it. And then when they finally went all in with Star Wars, or what's his name, General Mothra? What was his name?
Oh, General
Grand Moff.
Marth Tarkin.
Yeah, and he passed away He passed away.
Yeah, he was old back then.
He passed away, but his estate said, yeah, you can totally use his likeness. And they did
it. Grand Moff Tarkin. That's it. Just clicked in my head.
Oh man, and parts of it was good, but when they lingered on it too long, it wasn't great. I'm scared a little bit of what this technology is getting really good. Are they going to do stuff like that? They're going to get somebody with Stan's same build and just put over his face on there, or
I could see them I feel that
I hope they don't do anything like that. I think that's a bit much.
You could respectfully do it if it's a Big Hero 6 cameo where it's CG.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
But I think that to superimpose him in live action, I think would be kind of I mean, that's just my own personal opinion.
Same here.
If you have pre-recorded stuff that was planned in advance, a la Prince kind of thing, you know what I mean? Where it's like, this is how I'll be around long after I'm gone.
Oh, no, that wasn't planned. He really didn't. Prince didn't like hologram stuff. He's just like, nah, I'm not feeling that. And so the fact that they didn't do it. They actually did not go through with that.
But it exists though. That's what I'm.
Yeah, it does exist, but it wasn't like something he wanted people to do. He was like, no, I don't want to do that at all.
So I could see like Stanley still having scenes and cameo stuff, up to a certain period until that footage runs out, and then at that point, like I said, I think it's best to just let the soul just relax and at that point. But he will be missed. Again, wasn't a big part of the Transformer bubble, but he was indirectly related to some of its creations in an indirect way, at least. And but of course, I'm just happy that he lived long enough to see Infinity Gauntlet happen, even though he wasn't directly behind.
I would say that he definitely was happy. I mean, like we just said, that he went out west to really build up the
Marvel brand.
The Marvel brand, and two, the multimedia side.
Get that Dazzler movie off the ground, Stan.
Ah.
Well, again, it was a lot.
I wonder if they even go in, it's like, okay, we finally got everything underneath our umbrella. Dazzler movie.
Dazzler and Human Torch.
This is for you, Stan.
That's why we got Herbie the Robot, or whatever he was called, because they wanted to do a Human Torch movie also. But the point is like,
I mean, what I mean is that, he got to see this that come out at the end of it, multimedia stuff actually finally happened.
That was his baby in the end, was that to turn this into Disney in itself. You know what I mean? To turn all these these famous characters that even in the 60s and the 70s, were having costumes and action figures and all this stuff, to actually turn this into a multimedia property. And well, now it's everywhere. In the end, he got what his ultimate dream was, where before you knew it, there was Avengers bed pillows and drink cups and everything. There's Kleenex of the Avengers. I remember seeing those when the Avengers movie came out. There's even Kleenex. There was everything. So he ultimately did get his dream in the end, despite all of his other accomplishments. I think that his ultimate goal, he did achieve that. And I mean, and then he got to meet me, and then everything was ruined. But you know what I always joke about? Because I have footage of meeting him, and everyone jokes about how, because when he met me, he opened up my book that I was going to sign and had like photos of him in it and stuff, and he coughed inside my book. And everyone laughs like, oh, you could clone him now. His DNA is all over he literally coughed all over the inside of the book. And everyone's like, you put that in a petri dish. We could get to work, make a second Stanley Martin Leiber. But he will be missed.
Definitely.
I don't know what more I could say, but he was an awesome dude. Got to meet him. He was very friendly. He will be missed.